There we go. All right, Mo, go for it.
Yay! Well, welcome everyone. I feel like I should have some dramatic underscoring for my introduction, but oh well. It is good to see all of your faces, and I've missed seeing you. It's now been, I think, 6 months, 7 months since we had a Bravo Club reception. It was a long time ago for a fiddler, and I have missed seeing you, and hope that we'll see each other in person before too terribly long. As we're going through, it's probably better to stay muted. I think most of you already are. And so I think it's helpful, I've found in these big Zoom meetings, otherwise we can sometimes get weird echoey things. We will have hopefully some time at the end of this for you to unmute yourself, and you can ask any questions you might have, and we'll spare a little time for that. I do want to thank our sponsors. In particular, I want to thank our Bravo sponsors, Bob and Louise Salmons, of course, who've been doing it for so many years, and wish they were here right now. And especially want to thank our season sponsors, Chuck and Robbie Bro. Thank you, Chuck and Robbie. Yay! Appreciate you so much. I think Chuck and Robbie, for those of you that don't know, pitched in to help us have live music, which makes such a huge difference. So we can actually hire a band or an orchestra or whatever the show needs. And it's particularly, I don't think any of us really realized what Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed really, I didn't even know what was happening, I think, when I first watched it, until we had that rock band back there. It really made a huge difference to how that show plays. So thanks, Chuck and Robbie. And we also want to thank Instrom and Chevron. You may have heard and may not have heard that Maggie Robb recently passed away. And Maggie was an emeritus theater department faculty from a number of years ago. And I think probably all of you know that Dr. Gerlach, Mike, passed away about 2 months ago, I think. So they were very kind to me, and took me out to dinner a couple times and had lunch with them, and they had wonderful feedback about what we were doing, but also very supportive, and I certainly will miss having them around. I really miss them a lot. I saw Mike, I think it was shortly after Fiddler on the Roof, and he just was so kind and supportive and just had great things to say about everybody in the department. So we have dedicated our season to him this year. We kind of sat in a room back in January and came up with a theme for our season this year, which was Suit Up. And I don't think we had any idea that Suit Up also might mean putting masks on for the entire year, but that's how it's turned out. But I really love the theme, and so it obviously is quite applicable to our first show, and I think it's quite applicable actually to all the shows as you go through. And I'm going to talk very briefly about She Kills Monsters, which is the next show up. It's actually She Kills Monsters Virtual Realms. And it's just weird because Key Gwen, who is the playwright, wrote this show, I think about 10 years ago. And it's kind of did the rounds in high schools and colleges. And then he wrote a kind of updated version of it in 2016, which is a better version of it. And then last fall, I think, last year, he wrote another version of it, which was intended to be done online. And I believe he wrote this pre-COVID, oddly. But when I read the show, I was like, this show is actually much better than the other two versions. And I think given the circumstances of COVID, that we ought to just go ahead and try to do it that way. So it's been great fun. We're collaborating across disciplines in the show in a variety of ways with departments that we don't normally cross-collaborate with. So I'm very excited about that. To start with, we're working with the film, digital animation, and photography department here at CMU. And so we have, I think, about 10 students that are in that program that are all contributing to backgrounds and character designs and animations that are going to be a really great additive part to the show. We're also, thankfully, working with CMU TV and Greg Mikolai over there at CMU TV and all of their students who are doing all of the filming of the show in their studio. And we decided to do it that way so that we could green screen the entire, all the scenes, and then we could drop in backgrounds rather than trying to create a whole bunch of sets. And I think for this particular show, it really works well. At least we hope it will. Matt and I met for about 2 or 3 hours today, just kind of trying to figure out what the heck we're trying to accomplish here. But we're really grateful to them. Darren Kamstra from the music department, I actually think is writing a bit of original music for the show. So it's basically 3 different departments that we're working with to help produce this thing. And then and that will open on October 30th. And it will just be a digital show. So it'll be streamed actually through the CMU theater website. It'll be different than that separate website, which is the Naked Mole Rats Showtix website. And then I know I'd like to introduce Amanda Benzen, who is the director and choreographer for Embracing the Shadow, which is opening November 13th, 14th. Want to say a little bit about that show, Amanda?
Yeah, absolutely. I count myself very lucky, and I know the students feel the same way, that we're actually able to be in person for rehearsals and classes right now. So in the world of dance, that means that everyone dances 10 feet away and has masks on, and we do lots of cleaning of our highly touched surface, which in the dance world is our floor. So that's been interesting, but everybody's been really great about adjusting to that and accepting the challenges of choreographing socially distanced, which means no physical partnering, limiting floor work, key aspects to a lot of dance forms that we do at CMU. So it's been interesting and a challenge, but I'm really excited about the piece that I'm creating. We also have faculty work from Gabby Cahill and James Wallace, and we're doing our first fully virtual guest artist residency. Our guest artist is Courtney World. She's an associate professor of dance at a school in Tennessee, and she'll be setting a tap piece on the students, which should be an interesting weekend of challenges and delights of how do you Zoom and choreograph tap, which I found just through my experience teaching tap last semester, and then this semester having some students out, temporarily, that it is a challenge for sure, but I'm looking forward to that work, and I'm so glad that the students still get to experience a guest artist. That's one thing that we're able to keep in this new COVID world, although in a different form. It should be really exciting process for them. And then in 2 weeks, we have 7 student choreographers that are adjudicating to be a part of the dance concert, and their work is all really interesting. And our theme really is, kind of interrogating the shadow parts of ourselves and our society, and things that we keep hidden, things that we choose to reveal. Light also plays a part in that. So we're really excited to have Match Life doing the lighting design for that show. I think it's going to be really a really awesome show. And our goal right now is to have a live version of that, and also do a recorded version of that concert as well. That's dance.
Thank you. I can't wait to see what you all are going to do. Do you want to say a little bit about the Jones Cabaret series, Jeremy?
Yes. So as you know, our Jones Cabaret series is notoriously in small spaces. That's just part of its charm, either at our sponsors downtown, Charlie Dwellington's, or in our own Mesa Experimental Theater. That I didn't want to see the Cabaret series go away completely. Even though it really is unlikely that we can present it in either of those two spaces. We felt like moving it into Robinson would be just really not let it feel like a cabaret anymore. And so instead what we've done is we're creating a piece called Songs for a Better Day. And it's going to play in I'm trying to show you while I talk, let me see if I can do this, two things at once, but show you the poster for that as well. But it's going to be playing December 11th through 21st. And it will have some holiday music in it, but it will not predominantly be holiday music. But I feel after we get through the month of November, we're all going to just be needing something a little more cheerful and distracting during the holiday months. And so this will all be digital. The students have been given parameters for what the cabaret will be about. They're bringing in their own pieces. And I specifically asked them to bring in music that makes them feel better and gets them through the day right now. And so they're presenting those. Their audition is sending in a finished video performance, and I'll select from there and edit them together, and then I'll include my typical banter in between each song, so that can work that way. So that's going to be Songs for a Better Day. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you on both counts. So I just wanted to, we have, I think, 5 of our Bravo scholars here with us right now. And it's great to see all of you guys. As you well know, your contribution through the Bravo Club makes scholarships possible to some of the students that we really want to get to CMU. And so here are not all of them, because we actually, I should have checked this before.
15.
Was it 15?
Or 15.
Yeah, and it was, I think we gave out over $20,000. I think it was closer to $25,000. Do you have that number on? It was significantly more than we've done in a while. And so the only reason we're able to do that is because of your generosity. And so I want to just thank you. This is why we're doing all of this. And I ask all of you Bravo scholars, just one at a time, I think I'll call your name. And then if you could just say your name and your hometown, your major, and maybe a little bit about what you dream to do and your favorite thing about Mesa so far. So I see you at the top of my screen, Katie, so let's start with you.
Okay, well, I'm Katie Spann, and I'm originally from Rock Springs, Wyoming. I'm a musical theater major, and I would like to continue studying musical theater and go on and actually teach at either a high school or collegiate level. And I think my favorite thing about Mesa so far is just everything to do. My hometown is a fairly small town. It's probably about half the size of Junction, so just having other things to do.
What is your hometown, Katie?
Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Rock Springs, Wyoming. Okay, that's great. Well, great, thank you. Let's move down. I think Isa, let's go with you next. Not hearing you yet.
Can you hear me now?
I can.
Yes, okay. Hi, I'm Isa Sanchez, and I'm from Grand Junction. I'm double majoring in music theater and psychology, and I would love to either become a child psychiatrist or become a film actor or a regional actor somewhere in this country. I don't know where. And I think the thing I've been loving most about CMU is the group of freshmen we have in the theater department. I love how close we become, like, so quickly, and it's been really nice to just have that community around.
Glad to hear that's happening. I saw Issa last year in Little Shop of Horrors, and she was really wonderful. And now Kobe.
Hi.
Kobe.
Hi, I'm Kobe LeDuc. I'm from Grand Junction also, and my major is going to be acting directing, and it kind of fits into also my dream job. I'd like to one day become a director for certain films, and preferably comedy, because that's usually what I'm good at. And I love working with different scenes and everything. But also, I'd also like to get into fashion design is something I'm also trying to work into. And that's the one thing I love about CMU is our department is just so amazing. There's so many people doing different things that you just meet a whole variety. It's not just, one thing. It's all like theater. It's like just so many beautiful things in one. And I love that.
Cool. Thanks, Kobe. Ella, I see you next.
Hi, I'm Ella Rosencrans. I am originally from Manhattan, Kansas. I am double majoring in creative writing and musical theater. I would love to do writing or editing of some kind. I'm not really sure yet, but we're figuring it out. And the thing I love most about CMU so far is that this department is so nice and friendly and inclusive, and I really enjoy that.
Thanks, Ella. Double majors. I love these double majors. It's great. Jake, you're next in my screen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jake Lendy. I am majoring in music theater. I'm considering doing a minor in dance, so I think that would be really fun. I'm originally from Commerce City, Colorado. It's about 30 minutes north of Denver. And I don't know, I think my favorite thing, just being here at CMU for such a short time, everybody's extremely inviting and extremely accepting. It's been a very, very positive environment, a really positive environment to work in and to learn in. And so I'm really excited to continue doing that. Post undergraduate years, I guess, I would just love to do anything in which I could be a working actor, a living actor, performer. I would love to travel. I would love to do tours. I would love to do absolutely anything that I can feasibly do. And I would also love to coach, teach at some point, and just kind of give back. So thank you.
Thank you, Jake. And I think the last person up here that I can see is Jocelyn.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jocelyn Burke, and I am double majoring in dance and musical theater. And I'm from Arvada, Westminster, Denver area. I say all three because I had my school one place, and then I was driving in between three of those all the time. And I think what I would love to end up doing, there's 20 million things I would love to do, but I would love to work in film at some point. I love fashion, so maybe some of that. But at the end of the day, once I have some years in the professional world, I would love to open up my own studio where I focus on connecting all aspects of singing and acting and just performing. And yeah, I think that would be really fulfilling.
Great. Thank you, Jocelyn. Great. Well, it's great to have you guys here. We're really delighted to have you, and I can't wait to see more of you on the stage here one of these days. Go back to my little agenda. Let's see. I think, Jeremy, you are up next to talk about the show.
It's my turn. So I was telling the production team a couple days ago, I said, normally I have some deep background information that I would like to, somehow make the show more meaningful for all of our patrons in these talks. And I know Chuck and Robbie have already seen the show, and it's pretty much on face value. It is what it is, and there aren't many secrets to tell about it. And so what I thought you might be interested in knowing is just a little bit more about the creators, and then to take some time and actually talk about what production has been like in the last 5 weeks and the last 4 months, and to hear from the production team as well about the process. One of the great things about doing this on Zoom is that it's very easy for us to show from each of our screens just the different design aspects that have gone into this. So we're going to try and make this pretty high tech. Let's see if I can manage it on my side, because I think I'm the only one who can mess it up at this point. So the play itself was written by, or the book itself was written by a man named Mo Willems. And I first came into contact with the book back in sometime around 2007, 2008. I had just started teaching here, and I had a student named, that name just left me. Anyway, if he's watching, he'll be happy about that. Brandon, who brought the book in. He was interested in writing musicals, and at that point, I had just come off a tenure writing and arranging musicals for children's show at the Avalon, which every year brought in between 10 and 15,000 students from District 51. For productions, and over about a 2-week period. And I said, well, sure, let's work on musical writing. And I created a independent study with him. And one of the first projects he brought in that he was interested in was this book, Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed. And he said, I think it would make for a good musical. I think it has all the elements there. And he was right. And I was immediately jealous that he had the idea before me. But anyway, I stayed a teacher and helped him through the process to start. And eventually he decided he wasn't going to write it and wanted to write something else. So he moved on. And so I kept it in the back of my head for many, many years. And about 3 years ago, we caught wind that Mo Willems himself had written a musical version of the show. And after doing some research in the Seattle Children's Theater production of it, I said, oh yeah, we need to do that whenever it's available, because it's just a really charming show. So let's talk for a second about Mo Willems. Mo is a children's writer from about 1993 till 2002. He was writing for Sesame Street, writing and animating for Sesame Street. He won 6 Emmys during his time writing for Sesame Street. From about 2003 on, he's been writing children's books, and these are a couple of his more famous books: the Knuffle Bunny series, his more recent, the Elephant and Piggy book series, which are for younger readers, and then one of my favorites, the Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, which seems obvious, but there's a great children's book there. So if you enjoy children's literature, it's really great stuff. And Chuck and Robbie, I know you have a new grandbaby, so this is good stuff. Make notes. So Mo Willems has won every major award that exists for writing children's books, and on top of being a New York Times bestselling author. He went on in 2019 to become the first education artist in residence at the Kennedy Center, just in time for all the COVID shutdown to happen. And during that time, and during the quarantine over the last couple of months, he has become very popular on Instagram and through other media, because he's been doing virtual doodles every day at lunchtime to keep kids occupied with creating art. And his popularity has grown quite a bit because of this wonderful series he's done. And if you haven't had a chance to check them out, they are charming as can be. And then the kids get to draw it and mimic it and send it in and can contribute in their own ways. So it's really lovely, and it's kind of opportune that he was in that position when this time began. The composer is a lady named Deborah Wicks LaPuma. She has done both scoring of children's musicals for the last 20 years, but also has co-written several plays and movies. Most popularly, the movie Ella Enchanted. She co-wrote that book, or the script for that film. She's gone on to write several versions of, or children's musicals based on Mo Willems' books. So Knuffle Bunny has been made into a children's musical, and a handful of others, including Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus. They're fun pieces and work really well in children's theater. And that's primarily what she's been known for, is writing children's musicals. And that is what you need to know about the creators to go into this show. So what I'd like to do beyond that is to talk about what it is like creating a live and streaming event in the time of the COVID pandemic. The first thing I want to share with you is that it's the first time in my career, although I've done a hybrid of this at different times, especially when I was working with cruise ships, but it's the first time in my career that entire pre-production process has been online. That means that all auditions were submitted via video, including a dance call, singing pieces from the show, and then creating monologues based on Aesop fables. They were great fun. Very creative. And then we went on and did the callback via Zoom. So they would come on and do cold readings on Zoom. And that's how we did the full audition process. But beyond that, the production team and I was thinking about this last night when I was working on my notes. The production team and I have never been in the same room together as a whole to discuss this show. We've had a handful of us together, 5 or 6 of us in the house during this last week of production. But beyond that, we've not had a single meeting about this show that was unmasked and in the same room together, which is really quite unique for a production process. I don't know that I've ever had that. I bet Matt has had that experience before. So that's really interesting part of this. And so I think that the thing I'd like to point out about that is that the ability for us to come to a cohesive production is really to be said about the production team's work. And the many more meetings we had to have with this process, because there just wasn't a lot of that in the room brainstorming that we were able to do. So we ended up having a lot more individualized meetings on Zoom to try and get into the answer. And one of the first answers that we had to come up with was, what is the world of The Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed? Well, there's a couple things we know right off the bat. One, it takes place in a tunnel. Two, that it is called The Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed, the rock experience. And so 2 or 3 decisions were made right off the bat. One is that if you go and listen to the original cast recording, it is not very rock. But one of my jobs here at CMU is teaching rock singing. So one of the agreements Doug and I made early on about the band and the style of singing that would be used here is that it would be a true rock experience, that it wouldn't be a musical theaterized version of singing rock music. So that started everything off and really moved us into the idea of conceptualizing what the movement would be, what the costumes would be, and what the set and lighting would be. And so one of the only piece of research I brought into the very first meeting was a performance by David Byrne. David had performed at, I think, the last Saturday Night Live before they went into social distancing, the last time they were in the studio and live. And he did a piece from his Broadway show, American Utopia. And there were so many elements in the movement and the setting and the lighting that I said, this is the place I'd like to be our jump off point. And with that, I'm going to ask Matt to take over for a moment and talk about what it is to work in a rock tunnel.
Thank you, Jeremy. So I'm going to share my screen. It was fun working with Jeremy on this and talking about it, because I love rock musicals as well as just rock and roll in general. I've done a couple of shows, specifically Spring Awakening, which really is more pop. But I've also worked on another one, Bloody Bloody Andrew Jackson, which to some extent is also pretty rock and roll and intense. And there's a common thread that sort of happens with rock musicals, as well as just rock concerts. And one of the things that came up And I use the term a little bit is flash and trash. And we would joke about the lighting and how, you know, you see all of the lights and it's exposed and everything, and the way that the lights like blind you sometimes and do some crazy stuff. So we know that like the music and those moments are really intense for that. But then the other side of it is that they are naked mole rats in a tunnel. And so we wanted to try and find a way to do the tunnel in a particular way. And so I'm going to share my screen really quickly and say share. And then, great. Oh my gosh, it's such a hot mess. Drop that down. I will go to this. Thank you for being patient with me. The naked mole rat gets dressed, the rock experience. And of course, there's our lovely little ugly, ugly creature. But man, they're so cute and adorable. So one of the things that we talked about was the use of what's called a rain curtain or a mylar slit drape. And it's something that is used in theater events, theatrical events, kind of in varying ways. But it's these gorgeous sort of long silver strands. And Jeremy and I knew that we both wanted to have one in general and have one in our inventory, but also to have one that tall, to have one that's, I've used one before, but it was only like the size of a door. And to have one that's like 16 feet tall or something and filling the whole stage was going to end up being something that could be both beautiful and then lighting wise pull us down a little bit and isolate down, and it'll feel more like we're in a cave with these little domes across the top, dark up top inside of this, and then isolate down. But we also have the ability to then explode and do some fun things. We were trying to pick the different colors that they had available with an iridescent or a silver and black right here, or a black on black or gold, or we ended up going with the silver on silver. Not wholly by choice, but it still turned out to be the right choice. And then we were also talking about how rock shows provide these, a lot of projections, and the integration of projection and lighting and rock and roll. And you can see the haze and the smoke coming up and a little bit of fire over here. This one, you have projection kind of going all across the stage. And then this one, you can see how people use projection to map onto what's called mapping onto three-dimensional surfaces. And so eventually we move on to a couple of the props, which I will come back to a little bit later. And what we ended up doing was deciding to go with this very large rain curtain here. And then the lights will sit, so you can see it has a very large curve. This is a bird's eye view. And so Jeremy didn't want them going onto the apron because we wanted to continue the social distancing. So they had to be 25 feet away from the first audience member. But we still needed to have enough room that the actors weren't completely in each other's faces the whole time. We need to recognize that social distancing. Up top, we had a very large band platform for Doug and the drummer and the bassist and the electric guitar to have plenty of room and spread out. I think they ended up going in each of the corners instead of this little formation. But and then we have a couple of moments in the show where we go to very specific Wilbur's clothing shop that he makes, and then we have a portrait of Grandpa, and this was more of a research picture for Grandpa, not what ends up being what it is, but I think you'll really enjoy what it ends up being. And then, of course, shifting into lighting, one of the main things that happens in rock concerts is the use of haze, and that haze creates what's known as beam architecture. And so you can see the beams, and it's almost like beams of light define the shape of the stage or the scenic elements in a way. From a distance, they look like hard, solid things. But they also tell us with movers and using mover lights, they tell us sort of where to look. And so not only can we explode out and hit the audience, but then those movers can then slowly tighten down to a single point on Wilbur. And so we get that explosive quality quality in what we're doing, but then we sort of zoom in and look where we need to go. These colors in particular sort of represented the color palette of the show. We have some really gorgeous lavenders and blue moments in the show. And then I contrasted at other times with what my assistant lighting designer and I jokingly said are watermelon lights, where we have a heavily saturated magenta, but we put it next to like a pretty fun green or a lime green. And it works and creates contrast. The same thing in these pictures. You can see how the haze affects the lights and causes us to do that kind of stuff. Sorry, I don't know why I said stop share. I want to show one other thing real quick, just because it's fun. And I'm going to share again, and I'm going to minimize that, and I'm going to go to my Vectorworks folder here. And one of the things that I kind of love doing is that we look at this thing in this two-dimensional bird's eye view called the ground plan. Don't want to do it back up. And then when I do a lot of my drafting, I tend to go ahead and draft in three-dimensional scale so that we can see the entire stage relative to how it fits into our entire theater. And so we have a 16-foot rain curtain with the band platform back here. And then we have a couple of other, I add some people in there. And you can see that there's this other podium thing that lives. If I zoom out a little bit and rotate, you can see that there is another sort of platform that lives underneath the band platform. And this part slides out and it becomes a lot of fun. I put flying scenery, of course, up into the grid. But I also wanted to show you in this particular picture, I also do a lot of my light plots in 3D as well. So you can literally see the exact instrument that we have hanging, where it's located. And as Jeremy and I remarked, when we were in tech rehearsal, he said to me, I really love looking at a clean light plot. And I have to admit, I absolutely agree. I love looking at super polished, clean, symmetrical light plots. So it's a lot of fun, and that's what I have. And I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Matt. Appreciate it. And so the other side, and Matt already showed you a picture. The other side, of course, is the ugly, ugly little mole rats that they are. The ugly cute, as you say. And how do we translate the naked mole rat of reality and the naked mole rat that Mo Willems creates in his book and in his animation into the stage product? And of course, that would have to fall on Jill Van Brussel. Tell us all about it, Jill. You're on mute, Jill. Can't hear you.
All right, let me take a minute to get myself there. All right.
Oh, look how cute he is.
All right, so as Jeremy said, we had to grapple with our friends, the naked mole rat. So we really had three things that we had to try and achieve. And one was to capture our ugly little friend. I'm going to say ugly, ugly. I don't think they're ugly cute. They are challenging looking little creatures. Then he really wanted to embrace the wonderfully sort of whimsical children's book nature of the drawing. So we didn't want to get too realistic. We wanted to live somewhere in the Mo Willems illustration world and have that kind of children's theater look, but we also needed to embrace the rock experience. And I had a fantastic design assistant on this show. I was really lucky. She did a lot of research on other productions, which we took a little of this and a little of that, but mostly we rejected. We kind of wanted to really find our own road on this. Something that had, most of them, like the recording that Jeremy was talking about, felt more music theater or more children's music theater. They didn't really seem very rock. So we had to do some exploration. So first we had to figure out, what do we mean when we're saying rock? What kind of rock are we looking for? How are we going to grapple with the body shape? And how are we going to grapple with the wonderful texture on the mole rat? All those wrinkles and lines and little strangenesses of them. So we did some explorations. Could we take sort of a fashion inflected approach and just get the shape with clothing and draped fabric? Or we looked at various kind of rock star approaches. Could we do something that's more like a unitard, sort of David Bowie style, looking at some of our glam rockers from the past? Do we need to capture all those neck wrinkles, like with something like a neck piece, like in the picture of Devo here on your upper left? Should we play with hair to individualize them? We looked at a lot of different things before we honed in on what it should be. And so we started by really starting with the body. And we really wanted to reshape the body, have this wonderful sort of whimsically kind of pear-shaped body that was in the book, and that kind of made them very gender neutral. We decided we would go with a more sort of 90s grunge rocker. If you can see, it was a sort of to get a little bit of a hard edge. We'd reshape the body with a padding suit. And then we would, instead of embracing the more pink mole rat tone, which we found vaguely disturbing to see sort of a pink nude suit, it just was a little bit too much for us. We decided to go with gray, which the more gray tones of the naked mole rat. And to try and get the texture through sort of fake leather, which would feel a little rock and roll, hopefully, and some wrinkled fabric. And so here's and then we'd also use some splatter paint effects to try and somehow bring all those three things together: the cartoon, the naked mole rat, and the rock experience. So they look like little, hopefully, grunge rocker mole rats. My student assistant, Lauren, did a makeup design. So she explored all kinds of things from sort of minimal to cute, trying to capture the feel of them. We knew we wanted to use welder's goggles to give them sort of little teeny tiny mole eyes. She did some tests on one of our understudies and backstage singers, Marge, you can see there, so that Jeremy could look at makeup and figure out what he wanted. And then so that we could have a really low contact process, because the makeup was actually pretty complex. So she created a video that we gave to the actors. They're all, because they had to be unmasked in the dressing room, so they had plexiglass shields in between them, but she created a movie for them so that they could see the makeup on video and learn how to do it themselves. And then she just sort of hovered in the periphery with her mask and gloves on to provide guidance and coaching as they went along. So that worked really well. We in the costume shop, we had to make all these what we called onesies. So you can see on the left here, we had to figure out how to make these padding suits, because under their suits they got a whole other suit. So there was all kind of combinations of creating padding suits that they wore in rehearsal for about their last week, and then figuring out how to create tails. You see our little tail assembly line there in the costume shop in the center. And then working on the mannequins so we could work over all that padding, creating all of our drop crotch pleather onesies for our mole rats. And then Lauren did all the craft work. She went in and did all these wonderful paint splatter effects on them. And then they were able to rock the tunnel. So that's a bit of our process as we went through. And I have to say, the actors have worn them with real brio. They have sold those mole rat costumes and made it work as rockers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jill. Beautiful work.
Sure.
I should point out that early on, one of the discussions we had, Jill mentioned this idea of hair, and we discussed giving them all a different punk hair color. And I said, no, the point is that they all look alike. And this was great until we got into filming. on Monday and Tuesday night, and the film crew who'd only seen the show once couldn't tell they couldn't identify who to follow. And the next night I said to Jill, I'm like, do you regret that we made them all look alike? She's like, absolutely not. I'm like, good, because I don't either. I'm like, it accomplished what it needed to accomplish.
Yeah, it's about conformity and breaking with conformity. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
We made a choice, we went.
And it did. And I think it works really well. So thank you so much, Jill. So then, of course, we get into rehearsal. Like that's all just before we get into rehearsal. And rehearsal, like I got to be honest with you, the process was complicated, and the process is always complicated. But the idea of making all of our COVID-related accommodations about a week before we came out of the summer break. A study that was done in coordination with, I believe was it CSU or CU, Mo? I don't remember. One of those.
CSU, I believe.
I'm sorry?
CSU, I believe.
CSU and the National Band Association and several, the National Association of Teachers of Singing, this large study that was done on the aerosol emissions from singers. As well as instrumentalists, and projection from actors. And what they found was that singers can project this aerosol emission up to 25 feet. And of course, there are several anecdotal evidence of large portions of the population becoming infected because of singing and because of being around singing, specifically unmasked. And so what we did was we purchased these singer masks that look like ducks. They are made by the Broadway Relief Project, which is a collection of Broadway costumers and wardrobe personnel who are out of work, who decided to create these specifically for singers. And what they do is they're made out of theater canvas, and then they have a wire around the front that can be conformed to the individual face, and very little is getting in and out of there. And what that meant is that all of us as singers, and I've been lecturing in mine because it gives me a little more space for projection and moving my mouth, we've had to get used to hotter air being that close to our face. You're not getting a fresh breath of cool air very often. And working past that idea. In addition to that, we had to keep all singers masked. We had to keep them 10 feet away from each other in the rehearsal space when we were doing a full singing rehearsal. Doug had to be placed behind the singers and also masked. And we had to rehearse whenever it was just a singing rehearsal. We had to rehearse in 30-minute increments with a break in between that allowed for a complete air exchange. Now, fortunately for us, in 136, the space just across from the box office, or next to the box office, where we rehearse, it was tested, and it exchanges the air 17 times an hour, which is about 3.5 minutes, or every 3.5 minutes. So we would give it a full 3 cycles. So we would rehearse for 30 minutes and then run outside and do a rehearsal outside for 10, 15 minutes while the air exchanged, and then come back out. And that was the first week. When I first scheduled music rehearsals for the show, it's an hour long. The music is fairly simple. I'd said one night should do it. That's great. Ended up taking 3 nights. And really, it wasn't because the students weren't prepared. It was that we had to get by the typical, just when you get on a roll, 30 minutes in, you have to take a break. And that's difficult. And the other thing is there's a lot of psychological work that has to, you have to get across some barriers of sitting there and singing with a mask on the entire time. It really required, it took about a week and a half for them to get to the point where, okay, we've got it on, let's stop thinking about it and let's do the work at hand. And so that took a lot of time. And with that in mind, we also had rules that were, the performance couldn't last longer than 60 minutes indoors. And they could be masked, but they were going to have to be in family groups, which I'll talk about here in just a few minutes. We had to stage them with 6 feet distance, which we could allow them within 6 feet of each other, but they couldn't stay there very long. And so that immediately set these rules that I actually found kind of fun. It's Amanda and I talked a couple times about the idea that, okay, we've been told what the rules are. We now have to live within this rule or this world where they cannot get within 6 feet of each other in this tunnel. And that's kind of the starting point for movement. And from there, I'm going to have Amanda talk about how we got to rock in the mole rat body. Go for it, Amanda.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, it's lucky that we're all creative artists and are given these challenging parameters to really test our creativity. But as far as the rock experience goes, looking at our students and our cast, we're like, okay, what is the one through line that has to be in their bodies across all choreography, all songs, all scenes? And that really is embodying what it is to be a rocker. And our students didn't necessarily start off with that knowledge. I will say we're lucky because we have this symbol, the Maverick symbol, which is very rock and roll. So they already knew that. So we were one step ahead as far as that goes. So Jeremy and I kind of talked, and every process with, incorporating dance into a musical is different. But rather than jumping right into choreography, we thought we really need to do some embodied research of what it means to be a rocker. So we asked the students to find full-bodied motion of rockers. So they, you can see here some of the people they chose: Jimi Hendrix. Yep. So
there's a little Mick Jagger there. There's a little
little Mick Jagger.
Yeah,
I'm like, all these names have escaped me. Janis Joplin was in there. She's not pictured there. So it was interesting, first of all, to not give them parameters of who they could choose from, but just to see who they would define as rockers. So Prince made it in there too, and David Bowie. So we looked at the pictures and we discussed them. What do they see within the movement? What do they see in the embodiment? And then we all stood up in the studio and tried these positions, and then talked about what it felt like, what the energy behind it was, the kind of contortions that you do, or the kind of spreading out power stances that are so typical of rock. So we played around for an entire rehearsal with just that, knowing that was really the through line as far as embodiment goes, with the exception of Hats and More, which is very much a classic jazz and tap number. And I know Beverly joined us, so there is a little bit of tap if you haven't seen it yet, Beverly. And there is a tap piece from a guest choreographer in the dance concert. So with the exception of that number, we really had to find that embodiment. So it was really helpful for the students. I don't think they realize, because rockers make it look just part of the gig, part of what they do, how difficult it actually is to do that while you sing and while you dance and project that kind of energy. And then adding the bodysuit and the idea of now you're a naked mole rat rocker, how does that change things? So things that might read in a human body as sexy all of a sudden became kind of comical, which was really fun to kind of play with that transition once we brought the costumes in there. How does it change now that you're a rocker? What are the things maybe you can't bend over as far as you did before, because now you have this belly and giant legs? So it was fun to work with all of those challenges, and to really see the students grow within those roles to where it is now has been really great.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I want to throw out also, Amanda and I've talked about this, and Mo and I've talked about this also, that one of the interesting things to come out of this is that because the students were masked until a week ago, they had to become better at using their bodies to tell story. So if we can look at, if we're looking at the bright side of all this, it was a really strong teaching movement. And I think it's really clear in this performance, their use of their bodies in storytelling. And it was a lot of fun to teach them in that way, because we couldn't rely on facial expression. In fact, we were pleasantly surprised that they had any when we finally took those masks off. And there was definitely a moment last week where we had, or earlier this week, where we had to say, so remember that you typically smile throughout a tap break, because they had just forgotten that anybody expected them to. So thank you, Amanda. From there, everything became about how to get it up there. To make it all more challenging, before we had gone into quarantine, we had decided to, since it was only an hour-long show, that we would give it a week less rehearsal than we typically do for a musical in the first slot. And after we decided that we were going to do it, later in June, July, when we finally made the call that we were going to go forward, we also decided we were going to film it, but we didn't add any rehearsal time back in. So basically, we normally would go into tech rehearsals on Saturday, and instead we went into tech rehearsals on Wednesday night, and so that we would be ready to film on Monday. The film crew, Greg Mikolai brought over a film crew from CMU TV, four of his students, and they did a production of that. Our own Josiah Fingerlin, who's the sound designer for this show, and one of our students, one of our senior design tech majors, he had to figure out how to record multi-track recording. We had 16 different tracks going through, including the band, the backup singers, sound effects, and the on-stage cast, and how to record them separately so that we could then later mix it down. We got to the end of Monday night and we're like, finally, we got it done. And Tuesday morning I came in feeling great. Matt comes in feeling great. Josiah comes in feeling great. And Josiah gets ready to prep for our mix down session, and none of the audio is there. Everything has recorded, but as we found out later, not to get into the minutia of it, that it had actually recorded the 16 other tracks on the board and not the ones that had mic or sound equipment through. Fortunately, amidst a very busy week for CMU TV, Matt went over and proffered with bribery to get Greg to come back with his team on Tuesday night. And I got to give kudos to Greg and his team, because in addition to filming and editing down Naked Mole Rap this week for us to go up on Thursday, eventually Friday, they are also filming the Family Health West benefit this week. And tonight they're filming the Club 20 debate. So they are immensely busy this week. And so thank you again to Greg and his team for the wonderful work of doing that. So basically on Tuesday afternoon Tuesday night, we filmed again. It went much more smoothly and we were glad to have had a second pass at it. Wednesday from 2 until 7:20, Josiah Fingerlin and I were over editing down what we had. And of course, there were still some issues, and so we had to make do with some things. And then ran back over here for a 7:30 final dress of the show, and then opened on Thursday night. I say that it was hard, and it was. And I think the thing to point out is that theater is always hard. It's just a difficult process. There's so many different elements that go into it. But when you think about that difficult process and then compound all the social distancing and the testing and the amount of work that went into just making sure that we were all in a healthy enough place to be able to take our masks off. And by the way, not everybody takes their mask off. The 6 members on stage take their mask off while they're on stage. And as soon as they step off stage, someone is standing there with one of our disposable masks for them to put on over their makeup, for them to go along and get their props or get their costume change, and then they run right back on stage, take it off, which of course is an entirely new process for them, because then they have to remember to take the darn thing off because they've gotten so used to wearing it all the time. And so everybody backstage is masked. The backstage chorus takes their mask off to sing the numbers and then immediately puts their mask back on. They are on a separate side of the stage from the crew, and both the scene crew and the pin crew and the dressing crew. Because of the way we set that up, we put all of those crews on the smallest side of the stage and gave the singers the big side. The band is up, 10 feet higher than everybody else. Is that right, Matt? 10 or 12?
No, it's 6 feet.
Oh, never mind. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, but they're head to head. Like if
Yeah.
they're 6 feet out, you're already giving that distance.
Yeah.
So,
and
yeah.
they stay masked the entire time. All cast and crew were tested a week before we opened the show. The cast and crew were then tested again a couple days before the show opened, and will be all tested again on Tuesday before we reopen after the second week. It's challenging. I would dare say that everything we do now takes about 3 to 5 extra steps that we would not have been doing in another situation. And just as soon as you think you've got everything thought through, something that you take for granted shows up and you go, oh, right, there's that. But I say all that to say that this is the privilege of being in front of a live audience at this time. And I told the cast last night, we had about 60 in the last 2 nights performances, all socially distanced and masked throughout the production. And I was in green room last night and I said, we're really excited. We may hit 100, which is still 2/3 of what of the 150 we're allowed in our 650 seat house. And I said, I never thought there'd be a time in my career where I'd be so excited to see 100 people in the house again. But that being said, I think President Foster said it best a couple weeks ago with a message to the students that it's a privilege to be able to do what we're doing. And it's a privilege to be able to bring people back together. And as much work as it has been, I think we all can agree that it's been worth it in the end to be able to provide this for our community and for our students. I think the brightest spot of it, and then I'll hand it over to Mo, is that normally we would do 4 daytime matinees for District 51 to bus in kids. At the highest capacity, we would seat about 2,400 for a show. This year, as of now, our latest count is that 3,500 students are going to get to see the show. And more coming in every day. And those are students, not just in District 51, but also some of our high schools that we work with down in Montezuma Cortez, up in Glenwood Springs. And so we're reaching out to not just students here in the Valley, but also on the Western Slope. And that's a real honor. That's a real opportunity. And we don't take that for granted. And with that, thank you all for being here. I'm going to let Mo finish this up.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, it's been a very interesting process all along the way, including all the way up until we were trying to get the video uploaded onto the Showtix site, and we were doing that. I think Greg was loading that at like 1 o'clock in the morning. And then for a 10 o'clock show that was going to be streamed to a bunch of elementary school kids. And we were using a platform that we have never used before, and that was just created actually in the last couple of months by NTI so that people could stream shows. So it's a little bit of a work in process. Everything's a work in progress right now. And so we discovered that in putting all the links together, that the Showtix actually didn't get linked to the teachers, and so they did not get to see it on Friday morning, which was a real bummer for Laura Connolly and Laura, and we had worked so hard to get it all the way there, and then we didn't quite get it over the finish line. But I think we've got it figured out now, and we are going to get to about 3,500 kids, which really is quite astonishing. I will say, however, that with 60 people came to the show last night, I think it was 58, and I looked at the receipts on that 58 ticket sales, and we brought in $300, which is not a way that any theater is going to hang around very long. And I was comparing it to Fiddler, the opening Friday of Fiddler when we did that. And I think there were 570 seats sold, and it brought in a little over $7,000. So $7,000 compared to $300, it's a little rough. And all I would say is just about that, is that if you have been, if it's been a prosperous time for you, and for many people it has not been prosperous, and I quite understand that. But if you have any other way to help out, we would appreciate it very much, because I think it's going to be tough for us this year. We're not going to, I think last year we brought in a little over $100,000 in ticket sales. I just, I've asked everybody, our Matt and Jill and Mike and our whole production team, to basically cut our budgets in half. And even then, I think with what we're doing, it's going to be really tough. So if you can help out, we would greatly appreciate it. And that's asking a lot when I know you're already being so generous with us. So I do appreciate you so much, and I appreciate you being here tonight. I like seeing Nicole over there, who normally provides us with all the wonderful food and everything, and she is not able to do that, but I'm really glad you're here. And again, it's wonderful to see all of your faces, and I hope to see you at our next Bravo Club, and we will do another one of these for She Kills Monsters, which will open on the 30th. And that's all for tonight, unless anybody else has a question. I think we have a few